Take a trip with me, will ya? Back to January of 2018. For Christmas, I got 2 games, Nier Automata and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. See, I had just gotten a Switch and I wanted something to play with it. That wasn't just, Mario Odyssey. So I got Xenoblade 2, it looked cool, it looked colorful, I said, why not, I'll try it. Give it a bit of a bash, if you will. And I initially decided to start Nier Automata first, but after a little bit in, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna try and alternate with Xenoblade 2. And then I started Xenoblade 2, and right from the jump, from the very start, the game hooked me. The game that is notorious for having a slow beginning that puts off a lot of people, I got hooked immediately. And I think I realized from that moment on, I had a weakness for 2 things. The adventurous spirit of Xenoblade 2, and Sky Continents. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to absolutely no-life Xenoblade 2 first, and then come back to Nier Automata. And that's what I did. I played Xenoblade 2, and I played that game a lot. And I fell in love with the characters, every character. The comedy was funny to me, the emotional scenes were emotional, the story was engaging and gripping. The combat took some time, I will admit, took about 40 hours to really get in the swing of things, but I toughed it out for so long because I was so invested in the world and the story of Xenoblade. There was something unique about the whole idea of Xenoblade and the way that game conveyed its story and message to the player that I found absolutely intriguing and unique about it. I couldn't really ever put it into words at the time, and I didn't fully understand the story back then. But I think after all these videos that I've made on Xenoblade, I've been able to put my finger on the pulse of why. I loved the idea that the world was so alien, so fantastical, so grandiose and epic in scale, and it contrasted with the very human, personal, down-to-earth narrative that was being told, with that fantastical world being used as a set piece, as a backdrop, to really emphasize these human elements. I loved video game stories back then, but Xenoblade 2 was honestly different in a lot of ways. Most of the stories that I really cared about were the long-form ones like World of Warcraft or Halo. Xenoblade 2, for me at least, was a self-contained narrative that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I loved every moment of it. The game strictly got better for me as it went on. And when I beat the game had one of those endings that to me was special. It was one of the only video game endings that ever got that kind of emotional response from me. Honestly, the list is short. Final Fantasy 15, Halo 4, God, what else? What would be Nier Automata, but you know what I mean, it was a very short list for me. And I fell in love with Xenoblade 2, and I wanted to experience more of it. I craved more, I desired more. And I had always heard about Xenoblade 1. As I went on YouTube to watch reaction videos, I must have watched the Etika reaction video to his reaction to the ending multiple times. I loved Xenoblade 2 so much, and despite the sea of negativity that kind of surrounded the game on the internet back then, I loved the game unabashedly, because of the way the game utilized character development, characterization. The characters were big, bold, bombastic. They had great jokes and comedy. The game had emotional sways from one extreme to the other. Xenoblade 2 also came at a time when I was really starting to get into anime, and like anime-esque games. So a lot of those tropes that may have been tropey for a lot of other people weren't for me. They were fresh and new, and they made Xenoblade 2 all the more special in a lot of ways, all the more memorable. Character design, the stories of Jin and Malos, Amalthus, Rex, Pyra, Mithra, Nia, Zeke, Pandoria, Morag and Bridget, all these characters, and I just loved the game and I loved the world. Had its issues, but I didn't care about them. I just didn't. Because the game and the story of Xenoblade 2 was so compelling to me, that to me, even back then, before I really understood the whole Xenoblade storyline and everything surrounding Xenoblade, it was already like a top 10, top 5 game of all time for me. And if you watch my top 10 video game series of all time, you'll know Xenoblade 2 is my second favorite game of all time. Because the more I replayed Xenoblade 2 in the coming years, ever since Xenoblade 3 got announced, the more I fell in love with it. The more I noticed, the more of its genius shown to me. The foreshadowing, the moments that just got recontextualized with Torna. I haven't even talked about Torna the Golden Country yet. Torna the Golden Country is arguably one of my favorite pieces of DLC for any game ever. I even have the standalone physical version of it. And the way that story recontextualized and added context and nuance to so many scenes from the base game was honestly so impressive to me, because I loved Xenoblade 2 by itself, but when I took Torna into consideration, it just made the whole experience all the more better, more fulfilling, more enjoyable, more engrossing. I wanted to learn more about it. It made every little individual moment and character far more compelling and understandable. It added depth and nuance to a story already rich with it. And then Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition would eventually release, and I'd finally have the chance to experience Xenoblade 1 for myself. I purposely avoided most of the spoilers for Xenoblade 1 on a vague hope that eventually I'd be able to play it, and eventually I did. And I played a good chunk of Xenoblade 1 for a bit, and I eventually got distracted with other games. But when Xenoblade 3 got announced, I'm like, you know what? Screw it, I want to beat this game. So I went back to Xenoblade 1. And I didn't like it as much as Xenoblade 2, but I didn't have to. Xenoblade 2, for me, was a top 5 game of all time at that time. Xenoblade 1, I was falling in love with for other reasons. Mainly the world. Oh my god, the Bionis and the Mechanis. I wanted to progress the main story, not even for the story itself, but just to experience more of the world. When I got to Sotor Marsh at night for the very first time, my breath was taken away. The artistic design in this series is absolutely something to admire, and for me is part of the story, because the way Xenoblade tells a narrative is that it utilizes the world design as part of its storytelling. It utilizes the aspects of what makes it a video game in a lot of ways, and sometimes subtle ways, to further its narrative and to further its narrative themes. And Xenoblade 1 does this to an absolute T, and does it so freaking well in a lot of ways. It's a story of us versus them. It's a story of endless, perpetual war between the organic life of the Bionis and the artificial life of the Mechanis. And you go from the Bionis, and you work your way from the very bottom of the Bionis all the way to the top, experiencing mind-blowing-esque zones time and time and time again, because Xenoblade 1 in that department doesn't miss. The Bionis is so diverse and engrossing and encapsulating with all of its different aesthetic design choices, and the way it's able to tell a story through the world design. Going through Gar Plain on the Bionis leg, and have that zone be in the shape of the leg, but be expansive and feel engrossing. It pulls you in and refuses to let go, as it showcases you its beautiful world that you just want to get lost in for hours on end, with the music blaring in the background with these beautiful themes. And then you make your way up to Magna Forest, and you have that waterfall, and you look up into the sky, and you see Frontier Village on one horizon, and when you look directly above you, you see Earth Sea. You see a waterline above you. God, it's not the only game to do that, I'm sure, but damn if it didn't do it well. Because Xenoblade 1 and 2, and arguably 3 in a lot of ways, never is afraid of going too hard with the aesthetics, is never afraid of saying, is this too much? Because when it goes too much is when these games' worlds are at their most beautiful and their most engrossing. They pull you in, and like I said before, refuse to let go, as you just want to stare at their beauty. And I'm playing on the freaking Switch. Do you have any idea of how well of an artistic design you have to make a game that beautiful, that engrossing, when you're limited by the Switch's hardware? You're not even using the highest hardware in the market. That is how beautiful of a design choice they had for Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3. It blew me away time and time and time again, without fail. Every zone had something new to explore, something new to behold. Earth Sea, I thought was a beautiful zone, and then it became nighttime, and oh my god, the way the light reflected off the rocks with Alchemoth there, it was something otherworldly. It was beautiful. You had Valak Mountain, oh my god, Valak Mountain at night. And the beautiful thing was, when you got to the Mechanis, sure, there was some aesthetic variety, but it was largely homogeneous, by design, mind you. because the Mechonis is artificial. It was designed to be robotic, and it nails that aesthetic. So whereas the Bionis has evolution and all these different aesthetics told to you throughout the world design and zone design, the Mechonis further its narrative themes of being this robotic location by really using a similar color palette and similar aesthetic largely for most of it. It's beautiful how they're able to integrate storytelling through the world design, and that is something few game franchises are able to nail as well as Xenoblade did. And when it comes to Xenoblade 1 in terms of characters, I love the characters of Fiora, Shulk, and Melia. They were great. I walked away from Xenoblade 1 wanting more of Melia, but then I played Future Connected and I got exactly what I wanted from that character. Xenoblade 1 in a lot of ways was just a fun adventure. I didn't like it as much as Xenoblade 2, and I still don't, but I loved the game nonetheless. And for me, my first playthrough, I tried to do all the side quests I could. I did a lot of them. I probably did 95% of all the side quests in the game. I did a lot of them. And it kind of messed up the pacing of the main story for me because I spent so long doing the side content, but it gave me a chance just to explore these zones some more, and my god. Xenoblade 1's world was just completely compelling to me. And whereas for Xenoblade 2 I love the world and its characters, I absolutely fell in love with the world story of Xenoblade 1. And then we come to Xenoblade 3, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a section of a game that is as well written as chapters 1 through 5. And even a good chunk of Chapter 6. You'll be hard-pressed to find it. And I know some people wanted more callbacks to Xenoblade 1 and 2. I was honestly fine with the way they did it. I thought it worked well as an introductory experience into the franchise, while rewarding veteran players like myself for being able to spot various locations or references or whatever. And one of the things I really loved about Xenoblade 3 when I was playing it was the fact that new players to the franchise and veteran players would play through Xenoblade 3 and have different questions from one another. Xenoblade 3 players who had played Xenoblade 1 and 2 would be asking all the way, who the hell or what the hell is going on with Melia and Nia? How did this world form? What is it of all these references to Xenoblade 1 and 2? What happened from the end of 1 and 2 and Future Connected to this game? And you would eventually get those answers. And if you're a new player, the questions you are likely to ask are probably more vague in nature. What the hell are all these set pieces? What's this giant robotic hand doing coming out of the desert? Why does one side have bird girls and the other side have cat girls? What the flaming hell's a no-pot? Why do Kevin and Agnes have completely different robots? And why do they look like that? What is going on with this world? And I really appreciated that Xenoblade 3 works through both of those lenses. It's hard. It's really dang hard to nail a story that is a direct continuation of two already 100+ hour RPG games, depending upon how much side content you did, because that's a tall ask. So how do you reward your veteran players while also rewarding newcomers and welcoming newcomers into the franchise so they don't feel completely lost and abandoned and ignored? Well, I think Xenoblade 3 in a lot of ways nailed that idea, and I think it was extremely successful because of that. And I loved the story that it told of these two warring sides of basically Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2. It reminisced to me in a lot of ways of the theme of Xenoblade 1. But I love the way that, again, that first chunk of Xenoblade 3, well, most of it, had this narrative of people being caught up in propaganda, being part of the war machine for Kevers or Agnes, having their loyalties tested time and time again, and all of it being treated as a game to Mobius, who literally played a board game to represent what was going on in the war. It had great parallels to the modern day, or to just human society in general, but it still, again, had those fantastical elements that made Xenoblade stories so compelling, while juxtaposing those fantastical environments like the corpse of the Orion Titan and the Mechonis sword being right there, juxtaposing all of that with a very human narrative going on. That's one of the things about Xenoblade that I absolutely treasured in so many ways, and that I still do. And while I'm more when it comes to the ending of Xenoblade 3, the way it's shot and framed, oh my god, it's beautiful. The entire Eclipse section of Xenoblade 3 has to be one of the most well-written sections of any game I've ever played. The characterization, the world, the way the entire world was framed as a circle to represent the cycle everyone was stuck in. So good! Origin being at the center of it all, at the origin of the circle. Math nerds rejoice. It's a little attention to detail that I really appreciate with Xenoblade 3 in a lot of ways. And while I have a lot of questions going out of Xenoblade 3, I'm just convinced we'll get a Xenoblade 4 follow-up, so it's like, I'm willing to wait. I'm personally not going to get upset at that kind of stuff, because I think they'll get addressed mostly in a fourth game. At least the important questions that I care about. And again, God, the ending of Xenoblade 3, that picture, just as someone who fell in love with this franchise because of Xenoblade 2, getting that picture was just like, my squad's okay. They got the happy ending. It was good. I loved it. For years, I'd always wondered what happened to the crew of Xenoblade 2 after the events of the game. And knowing that after all they went through Torna and the base game, that they got the happy ending, brought a smile to my face. And well, yeah, the ending of Xenoblade 3 is bittersweet in a lot of ways. Like I said before, I don't even know if I'm holding out hope. I just think it is. I just think they are doing a follow-up. Like, maybe they choose to not do that, but, like, all the pieces that were there and that have been teased and all the statements Takahashi has said just go in the direction of a follow-up, in my opinion. Seems kind of obvious to me, but, again, time will tell. But, like, where we are right now, Xenoblade as a franchise is going to be that series I'll never forget. They'll go back to time and time again to just re-experience it because I love it so much. And I haven't even talked about Xenoblade X because Xenoblade X was the first game in the franchise I ever played, but I never beat it back in the day. I also don't think Xenoblade X's story is its strongest aspect, so I'm mostly just talking about Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3. But after recently-ish beating Xenoblade X on stream, I love that game's story as well. But that game desperately needs a follow-up. But yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles, I love it. I simply do. It's great, it's compelling, the characters are memorable, they're bombastic. I love the way the game franchise just overall utilizes expectations to further its narrative and to usurp those expectations in key ways at different points and in different ways throughout the different games. They're so well written. They really are. And I think one of the things I really like about Xenoblade Chronicles in a lot of ways is that each kind of game has its own individual fan base. I think that's by design. They're all connected, obviously, and I love that interconnected story. But I love that each game has its own identity. It is unafraid to have its own identity, and doesn't feel the need to just copy and paste what the other games did before. They're willing to grow and evolve and change and spread their wings and fly to beyond the sky. Now, I don't know what the future awaits for this franchise, and Lord knows the wait between Xenoblade games can feel like a moment of eternity. But I think at some point at Journey's End, we'll find where we belong. Maybe Xenoblade 3 was one last year. Was that one final effort, you know? I don't think it is. I think the future is extremely bright for this franchise. And hey, 3 cheers for the future, whatever that future may entail. But I think I have small 2 pieces of hope that the future is bright for this well-beloved, storied franchise with endless possibilities. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content. And I know I greatly appreciate it. So stay safe, have a great day. Hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.